What is up, Roughnecks Nation? Welcome to Roughnecks Rundown. The question we're tackling today, should we have hope?
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I've got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
All right, guys, so today I sat down and I got to talk to Roughnecks head coach CJ Johnson just one-on-one for a good 10 minutes and ask him about the scrimmage, ask him about the QB battle, and ask him about the cuts that have been happening so far in camp. I say I sat down with him, but I was here in Waco and it was over Zoom, but it was just him and I, and so I'll say we sat down. Now, I specifically asked questions trying to figure out, should we get our hopes up, and to get some information for Roughnecks Nation out there so that you guys have a little bit of insight into training camp other than just the videos that they show on Twitter and Instagram. The first question I asked him was about the quarterback battle, because this is the question that everybody wants to ask. They want to know who is in front right now. Now, I asked him about it, and he said that it's still a very, very tight race. He said some days one quarterback is outshining the others, the other days another quarterback's outshining the other. But this is the second conversation I've had with him where the main quarterback that he brought up was Jalen McClendon. So a lot of people out there are reporting that Nolan Henderson has it in the bag, Anthony Brown brings something to the offense, and while I think there's some honesty to these things, they might be asking players, I'm not totally sure. What I do know is that the head coach is going to make the decision at the end of the day, and so far, the highlighted player that he's talking about is Jalen McClendon out of Baylor. Now, the first thing he said was that he has a huge arm. He has the biggest arm of this quarterback room, which means he's throwing deep balls. And if we know anything about this offense, what he likes to do is he really likes to hit the screen game. He really likes to try and bring the defense up so that he can then try and hit them over top. So when you have a quarterback like Jalen McClendon, who is pretty similar to Jarrett Garantano, who won the quarterback battle last year, it makes sense that he's liking what he sees. Now, this is to say today when he talked about Jalen, he said that he was shining a few days ago in camp and that he was hitting everything, looked fantastic, spinning the ball great. But when I asked him specifically about today and going against the defenders in training camp, he said that Nolan Henderson was the one who was shining. I am yet to really hear that much about Anthony Brown, but I don't think that disqualifies him from the competition. So if it comes down to just between Jalen McClendon and Nolan Henderson, I think the nod's going to go to Nolan Henderson. One, because it's pretty even. Two, because he played last year in this offense and he already has experience. And three, the fans really do want to see Nolan Henderson. Whenever you look at it, a lot of people are talking about him and Anthony Brown, but if you eliminate Anthony Brown from the equation, then I think you need to go with Nolan Henderson. Now, this is speculation, and I can only go off of what he said, and obviously he's not going to give everything. But he did say when I asked, what are you excited about going forward in camp? He specifically said he is excited to see how this quarterback battle shakes out, and he thinks that all three are really good. I asked, how does this compare to last week's quarterback battle? And he said he thinks it's better. He even thinks that Nolan Henderson is coming in better than he did last year when he was competing against Sinnott and Garantano. Another thing that I asked him about was that last night I posted on social media that Morgan Ellison was released. And if you're not following me on Twitter, go ahead right there at AceUFM. That's going to be your fastest way to get any Roughnecks news or information that I get. At first, I'm going to post it on Twitter and Instagram, and then it takes some production and time to put together a show. So if you're watching this, you're already behind. If you want to get the information up front, Twitter and Instagram are going to be your best way. And then right here is where I'll kind of break it down and explain it all to you. So I asked CJ directly about the cuts, especially because we haven't even hit a deadline to where you need to make cuts. He said that there's two reasons. One of the reasons is that some of the players have gotten injured. And if you have an injury that is going to last a few weeks, you can't make the team because there's just not enough time. The other reason is that he said if they realize that they want a certain type player or they need to fill a certain player archetype in the offense or defense, say they want a taller wide receiver or someone bigger in the trenches on offense or defensive line, now is the time to do that. That's what I tweeted out specifically earlier about my call, is that they are saying, hey, we understand that the trade deadline or the release deadline isn't for a little bit, but we know that we need to make these changes now because we want to have more training camp in front of us than behind us, especially if we're going to be bringing in new players. Speaking of new players, I asked CJ about the two new players that they brought on that got added to the roster yesterday. Israel Antwine, defensive tackle, coming out of the Massachusetts Pirates of the IFL, which has become the main pipeline. If you are a player trying to get into the UFL, talk to the Massachusetts Pirates. But I digress. They also brought in Lorenzo Lingard, a running back who was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He went to Florida, didn't really pan out, and then went and had an above average season at Akron. They brought in these two players to replace people that had either gotten hurt or they wanted to move on from. And so I asked, today you had a scrimmage dual practice where you were against the DC Defenders. How did they look? Were they a part of it, or were they just getting into the system? And he said that they have a cooling off period. They have to come in and they have to get used to the system, memorize the playbook, get their equipment. So they just sat out and did some studying today. Now on to the scrimmage. This is the thing that everybody wants to know about. I wanted to know about because they played against another team. So I asked CJ about it. And he said overall, he thought it was great. He liked everything that he saw. There were no fights, which if you've been in football and around professional football, basically every scrimmage ends in fights. But today, there weren't any. He said he really liked what he see and it gave him a lot of hope, which is what we're talking about today. Let's talk about the scrimmage though. It wasn't a straight up scrimmage where they were running plays, offense and defense. It was much more of a practice style is how CJ described it. And he said that the most intense thing that they did was 7-on-7. Outside of that, they did one-on-ones, they did offensive and defensive line drills, just kind of so they could see people other than their own teammates that they've been going against for the past week and a half. The biggest takeaway last year from the first joint practice was that our defensive backs got torn up. There were multiple cuts that came after our first joint practice with the Arlington Renegades. Honestly, everybody was posting that we looked really silly. My biggest takeaway from this joint practice was the fact that CJ specifically highlighted the secondary and said that we did great. Last week, I asked him specifically about Damon Arnette, former first-round draft pick of the Las Vegas Raiders, who has had a checkered past and came to the UFL to try and respark his professional career. This week, CJ brought him up himself, saying that what he has seen is amazing. He said he's 100% a first-round talent. He's bigger and stronger than he thought he was, and he said he's a lot better than he thought when he was first trying to recruit him to get him on the Roughnecks even as early as last year. This is huge. When you pair him with our 6'1" Keenan Isaac, these are really good defensive backs. I already posted about our safety room. Again, go follow me on social media. I love our safety room. We have size, we have thumpers, we have guys that play old school style football where they're coming downhill, they're hitting hard, and they're attacking the ball. Now, when we have corners that are also attacking the ball, that are violent, physical, and just great players of the game, that is a great accent. Last year, we got beaten over the top badly, but this year, it seems like it's a completely turned around secondary room, bringing back Colby Richardson and Corin Elder, who were personally the two best that we had last year. I think that there's a lot of upside here defensively. The other thing that he said about the scrimmage, like I said, was that Nolan Henderson had a great day. If there's one thing we know about Nolan Henderson, it's that he's not necessarily a practice quarterback. Last year, he lost the quarterback battle because maybe he's not going to throw the most accurate ball every time, and maybe he's not the most prototypical quarterback build. But what we did see is that when he gets his chance, he's going to come in and he's going to play lights out. He's an absolute gamer. That's when he really dials it in. He knows how to move in the pocket, how to improvise. And that's exactly what CJ said he saw today against the defenders in the one-on-ones and the 7-on-7s. Now, if you looked at social media from the Roughnecks themselves, we saw that there were also some off-schedule, on-time, throwing off your back foot passes by Jalen McClendon and Anthony Brown. And those were two passes that you should definitely be excited for. I really do think that this is an even quarterback battle, and I don't think that CJ is willing to narrow it down for at least another week or so. Another player that CJ brought up himself is 6'8", 335-pound offensive tackle Zach Banner, formerly a 4th-round draft pick of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the offensive line was weak last year. Our tackles had some tough play. So the fact that we have this absolute behemoth who's nicknamed the Hulk coming in, and he said he's expecting a ton from him. He loves what he sees, and he thinks that he's going to see a lot more. I think this is really going to help the offensive line. Zach Banner is also an incredibly likable guy. He's got a bunch of philanthropy, and he even has the Zach Banner podcast where he talks to NFL players and talks about offensive linemen in the NFL, which is interesting if you're a football nerd like me. Now, when it comes to the other side of the joint practice, I had to ask Coach about the DC Defenders. I said, how did they look? Was there anybody that you're like, hey, we need to game plan for that guy? He said, honestly, no, because it wasn't a full-on scrimmage. It was just kind of a normal practice setting where nobody was really outshining the other too much. He said that they ran one in and caught a touchdown, and then we caught 2 touchdowns, showing that we were probably throwing the ball more than they are because they have Abram Smith. But I think that looks good, and we matched up well against the DC defenders. Now, the last thing I asked him about was the new run game coordinator and offensive line coach, Tom Cable. When you talk about chemistry, there's 100% chemistry with this coaching staff. I've already heard from the other offensive line coach and tight ends coach, Jordan Higgins, that he thinks Cable is a huge step up and that he loves working with him. Jordan Higgins is an upcoming coach, and he definitely is soaking it in like a sponge, and his career is something that I can't wait to watch. Now, when it comes to previous chemistry, CJ Johnson and Tom Cable used to be roommates and coached together under Sean Payton. They have a ton of history, and he has said that everything he sees under Tom Cable is so much better than last year. He's not saying that necessarily our coaching was bad last year as far as the offensive line, but he thinks that we have improved, that it went from good to great. But if you ask me, it was pretty bad last year. Another thing is that as far as run game coordinator goes, we had Coach Garrett Sasheray, who was doing run game special teams coaching last year. But from what I heard, he was spending a lot more times on special teams than he was with run game coordination. So this year, to have someone who's specifically working on offensive line and the blocking schemes and the running backs with Tom Cable, I think that that really could elevate the run game. Even though we lost Mark Thompson and Morgan Ellison, we can still come in with Saquandre White, with Lorenzo Lingard, with TJ Pledger, and we can still run the ball effectively. Now, the last thing to talk about is the overall question of this episode. Should we have hope? Personally, as far as last year, it looked a little interesting going into camp. I definitely thought that we could have had a better camp, that we could have had a better showing, but I think that that has actually gotten better this year. When you talk about quarterbacks, I do think that we have improved in the quarterback room. I think that we have guys who are more accurate, and we have guys that are going to be more consistent than we did last year. The other thing, we did not have a fantastic secondary, especially on the outside last year when it came to deep balls. But the fact that we have Damon Arnette and Keenan Isaac with returners Colby Richardson and Corn Elder, I really do think that this is going to be a completely different secondary, especially with over the top. Markel Roby is coming in as a second-year player and a leader. I think that this defense, especially in the top half, is going to be a lot better. Now, when you're talking about the defensive line, I actually really do like Israel Antwine, who they just brought in this week. I think that he brings some size and a lot of physicality that we need in a young player like him. I know it's hard to root for the Roughnecks going into this season because of what we saw last year, but I really do believe that the vibe and the overall talent this year is good. I do have good feelings going into season 2 of the UFL. All I'm asking of the Roughnecks Nation is give it a chance. Come to game 1, game opener against the St. Louis Battlehawks. It's at least going to be a fun time. I think that game is going to show us a lot. And if it doesn't, then I'll come here and I'll eat crow. But until then, I'm so excited to be back in the swing of things. I'm excited to be bringing you guys information on the Roughnecks. Please make sure you go follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and let's get back into it. Rough them up. I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the UFM United Football Media. If you like that, please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you want more videos, you can check them out on our channel over here. The best one for you is right here. And then if you like mine, the rest of my playlist is right here. Thank you guys, and I hope to see you next time.